I want to talk about something today that often is not talked about in the podcasting space. And that is when your podcast is starting to feel uncertain or like it's not moving, investing can feel like the next step because it feels decisive. When you invest, something moves. There's structure, there's a plan, there's someone else involved. And that movement can feel like direction. And if you've been listening to the season, especially from episode 25 and on, you know that that distinction matters. And I want to talk about separating those two things today, because one creates momentum and the other one creates activity. Most podcasters don't grow because they don't have a strategy. No more. Welcome to the show, Podcast to Grow, where I help coaches and entrepreneurs turn their podcast into their most powerful business tool. I'm Elena, and I'm breaking down exactly how to get more listeners, more impact, and more sales. Let's get into it. When your podcast feels stuck, money feels powerful. You go from, I don't know what this is doing or what it's supposed to do, to I hired someone and we are building something. And that feels stabilizing. You now have someone that has possibly a timeline, they have deliverables, they had forward motion. And that forward motion can feel like clarity. But structure is not the same thing as direction. Structure organizes effort. Decision decides what the effort is for. If you haven't made that decision yet, your podcast can look cleaner and clearer without making it so. That's where the confusion starts. Okay, so let's break down what podcasters are investing in when they are looking for support. They're usually going after things like launch packages, ongoing production and management. They're going for support and possibly a rebrand of their podcast. And here's what they are buying into. It looks like structure, editorial planning, production support, execution, time compression, and accountability. And these things matter. They reduce friction, they reduce the overwhelm, and they keep things moving. And if you're missing execution, this works beautifully. But here's what investment doesn't automatically solve. It doesn't tell you what role your podcast plays in your business. It doesn't clarify who the podcast is truly for, or what decision your listeners should be making, or what your podcast is responsible for and what it's not. And whether that plateau you're going through is a positioning issue or a visibility issue. If those questions are left unanswered, support builds around uncertainty. You end up with cleaner and clearer episodes, but that question remains underneath them. And that's where disappointment creeps in. Not because the support you got was bad, but because the real problem wasn't execution. It was direction. If you listened to episode 26 with Rona, you know that her podcast started generating leads pretty quickly. Not because she avoided strategy and not because she didn't sell on her podcast, but because her podcast had a role in her business. And the production supported that role. It amplified it. It didn't create it. And that is the distinction I'm talking about. I want to be really clear here because I believe in investing in support. I offer most of the support that I talked about in this episode, and I invest in support for my business as well. But I don't invest to create clarity. I invest to accelerate clarity that I've already chosen. And that's the difference here. Because I often see in the industry, the language is muddying up what the decision is actually going to happen. So they're saying things like, let's work together, it will all work out, or done for you means less confusion, or launch with us and we'll make sure that it's all clear. And that language is so appealing because it promises relief, especially for podcasters that are stuck, right? But clarity doesn't transfer through proximity. It comes from decision. Support can hold that decision. It can refine it. It can build around it, but it can't choose it for you. Okay, so I want to give you 2 examples of what this actually can look like when you are looking for support to clarify that decision that you haven't made yet. And so I'm going to talk about podcaster A. She's been podcasting for a while. She's not a newbie. She's not inconsistent. She has episodes, maybe even hundreds of them. She's been showing up. She's teaching. She is refining what she does. She is maybe restructuring how her episodes are, but she's still feeling stuck. So she wants to push it a little bit further and see what else she might need to work on with her podcast, because she feels like she's still not moving. Her downloads are plateauing, and she is not having that connection with the listeners like she used to when she first launched her podcast. And with all the episodes that she's had, she just hasn't seen a tick up on her podcast, and she really wants to see it, but she can't quite name what might be wrong with her podcast. She doesn't know if it's her positioning, if it's her messaging, what exactly is going on behind the scenes that she is not seeing. And that makes her come to a place where she's thinking, maybe I should invest, because maybe I need something like better production. Maybe I need a producer. Maybe I need to start doing video or start another platform. What do I need to do to push this podcast forward, right? And it's because effort hasn't solved it yet. So hopefully investing will for her. And so she does it, and things get clearer. Her episodes are more concise. She feels like her messaging got a little bit better, and the structure feels a lot better to her as well. And 6 months later with her podcast, she actually kind of feels like she's in the same place that she was before she even invested. But she does have more polished episodes, consistent publishing, and a professional body of work, of course. And it's still feeling off to her, and she's just sitting with this and thinking, what do I have to still do? Who do I need help from? And what I would say to her is, what is your podcast actually building towards? Is it building authority to something specific? Is it warming people up to your offer? Is it supporting a shift in the business? Or is it just building content? And that is the misalignment. It wasn't that she got bad support. It was that execution ran the direction, and it wasn't decided on. Because what she didn't need was actually more execution. It was a diagnosis of what was going on underneath her podcast. And what she actually needed someone to ask her was, what was the podcast responsible for? What was it not responsible for? What is the misalignment that is actually happening here? Is this a production problem? Is this a visibility problem? Is this a audience problem? Or is this a role problem? Because those are all very different fixes for a show. And when you skip that conversation, execution just gets laid on top of confusion. And that's why some podcasters invest and still feel like it's not working for them. because the direction was never named and the direction was assumed. Okay, now let's talk about podcaster B. She's also been podcasting for quite some time, but instead of asking, how do I make this podcast better? She actually is asking, how do I structurally set this up so that it is aligned better with my business? So she doesn't rush into new production. She doesn't rush to rebrand everything. And she doesn't make big changes just because she feels like everything needs to change so that it will actually work out for her. She actually finds support to diagnose first. So with that support, she names the role the podcast is playing in her business. She defines what it's there to support, and she chooses the direction intentionally. Then she moves into investing in additional support for the podcast. And 6 months later, she is seeing a totally different picture from the podcaster before. And she has similar things. She has clean production, consistent episodes, and structured seasons as well. But her episodes feel anchored. They feel like they're part of a bigger picture of her podcast and her business. Her messaging repeats on purpose. Her call to actions make sense. And her content outside of her podcast mirrors it. And she's not guessing what her podcast is actually building. She has decided what it is building and what role it plays in her business. And what makes her different than podcaster A is because of the order that she went in. She went for that underlying issue first instead of going to production or support will fix everything and clarify everything. She actually went to the root of the problem. So possibly start asking yourself, instead of saying, should I invest right now in my podcast or should I wait? Ask yourself, have I decided what this podcast is here to do? Because when that decision is made, investment becomes leverage. So if you're in that moment right now and you're asking yourself if investment is the next step, then I want you to really have that conversation of direction with yourself first. And I actually have a free podcast strategy Kickstarter that actually helps you do that. It's not production or editing or execution. It helps guide you to figure out what is misaligned for your podcast and what role your podcast should be playing, and whether what you want to invest in is going to help that. Sometimes this helps confirm in the next investment you'll make. Sometimes it changes that. Either way, you move forward from decision, not urgency. If that's the stage you're in right now, go check that out inside the podcast description under this episode. You'll find the link right there. So what I hope you walk away with today's episode isn't just what should I be investing in first, but actually what question you should ask yourself before you invest. Is this a production issue or is this a direction issue? And that will help you make that decision so much clearer for yourself. And next week, I want to talk about what actually creates momentum when direction is clear and how that all works together. I'll see you there. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast to Grow. If you're ready to build or grow a podcast that actually supports your business, book a strategy and visibility foundation session with me. It's a clarity boost you didn't know you needed. You can find the link in the show notes. And if this episode helped you, share it with a podcast bestie. I'd love to connect with more voices just like yours.